Hello everyone, how are you today? Welcome to this new video where I will introduce and explain few important concepts about organizational communication. Well, let's start first of all with a simple metaphor. Think of organizations as containers or boxes that will encompass different elements of different natures. And then think of communication both as an interstitial fluid that flows between the elements within the container and also as a sort of glue or cement that holds collaboration efforts and therefore organization together. Communication is the way we share different things like information, ideas, goals, objectives, guidelines, perspectives, directions, expectations, feelings, and even emotions. And all of this is done in a context of coordinated action within a professional workplace or environment. This is why organizational communication can simply be defined as the process by which information is exchanged, received, and understood by two or more individuals. Through communication, we usually have the intent to inform, teach, motivate, encourage, and inspire people to positively influence their behaviors within the organization. Remember that I used the metaphor of the container representing the organization and the communication as something flowing within it and holding it together. Remember that? Well, if you imagine that as a picture in your mind, you will see that communication is actually shaped and molded by the structure of the organization. And by structure of the organization, I mean, of course, things like the workspace itself, the culture, the climate, is it formal, is it informal, is it mixed? Also the type of hierarchy, is it a bureaucratic organization? Is it actually an adhocracy? And what kind of leadership and management do we have in that organization? And of course, there are many other things that will be considered as important factors that will shape the structure of the organization. And this is true for all types of organizations, from small businesses to large multinationals and even non-profit organizations. For all of these, effective communication is crucial for the survival of the organization. But this also means that communication channels, techniques, tools, approaches, and manifestations will differ from one organization to another, and this is going to be depending on their aforementioned organizational structures. These differences and differentiations and disparities are going to be crucial to achieve effective communication. These differences and differentiations and disparities are crucial to achieve effective communication. Obviously, getting the right information to the right person in the right time is absolutely crucial, and this is true regardless of the type of industry or the nature and size of the organization itself. In some industries and organizations, the criticality, cruciality, and urgency of effective communication can be higher than others, like in healthcare, for example, where it's sometimes a matter of life or death for the patient. But to some degree, efficient and effective and timely communication is going to be outstandingly important regardless of the industry. Therefore, we have to understand what are the key elements in the communication process. What are these important factors and elements that we need to understand and address? First, we have the sender or the source that wants to transmit an intended meaning or information or data to a receiver. The sender is going to encode a message and send it via a chosen channel that can be a face-to-face meeting, an email, paper letters, instant messaging, phone calls, etc. And of course, after choosing the channel, the sender is going to be wanting to make the receiver decode the message and understand a perceived meaning. And the receiver is going to send a feedback or an answer to the sender, as we are generally considering a two-way communications here. Because we actually live and work in a world where we are ceaselessly increasing the implementation and use of technology and artificial intelligence, the sender and the receiver can be both humans, both machines or systems, or a human and a machine, and the roles of sending and receiving can be interchangeable, of course. Here, concepts like standardization and interoperability are very important too, but we will discuss these in other videos. Probably we don't have lots of time to discuss everything related to communication in this short video. So now you recognize that we have a sender that sends a communication content to a receiver that will receive that content and reply, answer, or give a feedback in a way or another. But we have a problem here. We have actually a major problem. The problem is that different people or different agents tend to interpret and understand the meaning of the exact same message differently. Consequently, we end up with a perceived meaning that is different from the intended meaning that is originally determined and encoded by the sender. A big problem, right? There is also another unfavorable parameter that we shouldn't forget about in the communication process, which is noise. So, what is communicational noise? Well, simply put, noise is any sort of disturbance, disruption, or trouble affecting the communication effectiveness and interfering with the transmission of the intended messages. This means that the encoded sense or signification of the sent content can be easily altered by the noise surrounding the communication process. So, where does this noise come from? Well, there are many factors causing noise. And here we focus, of course, on significant noise that leads to miscommunication or ineffective communication, at least. Among the sources of noise, we can cite these, of course, examples, and these can be external or internal sources of noise. We can have physical distraction like real noise. You are communicating with someone and you are sitting in a crowded place where you cannot hear very clearly and correctly the person you are talking with. Secondly, we can have things like mental and psychological barriers like the lack of focus or exhaustion or burnout or any other type of mental issues. We can also have what we refer to as semantic or linguistic barriers and errors. So two people who do not speak the same language, as an example. Moreover, we can have different knowledge, common ground, and different cultural background. So someone who is a doctor and they are talking with an engineer, there is some knowledge common ground here between them, but not if we enter into the details and intricacies of every science that is related to their fields or their specialties. So they have less common ground, less knowledge common ground than what you will have with two doctors or two physicians or two engineers in the same field. And also different cultural backgrounds, they can constitute a sort of understanding barrier. Another issue or another source of noise is the absence of real feedback. This also can be considered as a noise in the context of communication. So we need to eliminate or at least lessen, alleviate and mitigate those sources of noise as much as we could, and this is important to establish an effective communication process. So if we want to reduce or eliminate noise, we have to try and avoid interpersonal barriers also that can exist and that can prevent effective communication. And these, of course, can occur when individuals are not able to objectively listen to each other due to prejudices, due to lack of trust, due to personality clashes, due to bad reputation, or any other sort of stereotypes or negative interactions between these individuals. So selective listening is going to be an example here of those barriers that can also be detrimental to good communication within the organization. Again, we must emphasize the importance of watching out for semantic barriers, generally involving poor choice of terminology or unfortunate use of words and mixed or even contradicting messages. As a professional, you must aim to always apply the KISS principle of communication. KISS, of course, is for keep it short and simple. Another important point is that we have to think wisely about the choice of the communication channel that we want to use. This is crucial, this is very important to consider, as some people are just better at using certain channels over others, and specific channels are going to be better suited for handling some types of messages. You have to know when to use high richness channels and when to use low richness channels. So with high richness channels like face-to-face discussions, like phone calls, like video conferences, you have many advantages like the human contact, like the instant prompt feedback, and the two-way nature of the communication. However, high richness channels, they have disadvantages too, as it's generally something that is not recorded, that is hardly disseminated to larger audiences, and it's very hard to actually share the content of the meeting, for example, if you don't record it, and many parts of the content are often spontaneous and unplanned, so you lack the planning effect. On the other hand, with low richness channels like the case of reports, bulletins, statements, spreadsheets, letters, and different other written documents, we are in the opposite situation. So, which is to say that this type of communication is recorded, it's easily shared and disseminated, it's well thought and premeditated, so it's going to be a little bit more advanced in the level of analysis and interpretation, etc. But these channels are quite impersonal and they are generally one way with very slow feedback or sometimes even no feedback at all. Nonverbal communication is very important, and the main clues will come through body language, and these are going to be things like facial expressions, body position, eye contact, the tone of the voice, and other physical gestures. Good practice I talked about in a previous video is active listening, and this is important because it will for sure remove many communication obstacles. So if you have not watched that video about active listening, go back and watch it. It will help you. Another thing that I wanted to talk about in this video is the communication directions. So we can have different directions for organizational communication. We have upward communication, we have downward communication, and we have lateral communication that we can also label as horizontal communication. Upward communication, which actually starts from subordinates up to their superiors and leaders and managers, and upward communication is intended to inform the managers and the top executives about problems, about needs, results, suggestions, disputes, and grievances, and many other things that are going to be mainly about informing the superiors about the situation of the work or a certain project, and the information is generally coming from the subordinates. The downward communication, which is from the managers and individuals with higher hierarchy positions towards their subordinates and followers and employees, and it's going to be mainly aiming to influence them and give orders about strategies, about goals and objectives, about guidelines, about procedures, policies, and the organizational rationale. On the other hand, lateral or horizontal communication, it's going to be representing the coordination and collaboration between departments, ancillary divisions, and peers in order to accomplish problem solving, advice, alliance, improvements, feedbacks. So these are things happening at the same level of, these are actually communication efforts happening at the same level of the organization. This is it for this video today. So thank you very much for your time. I hope that this was a useful video for you and that you have learned many things and many concepts related to organizational communication. Feel free to suggest other subjects for my next videos by commenting below. And also, if you like the content, please like the video, comment on it, subscribe to my channel, and share it with others. Also, follow me on Twitter. Thanks again and see you soon. Have a great day.